in our book, I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. And I'm hoping I have the right place for today because it doesn't seem like we covered that much last week. So are we on does everybody agree that we're on the question still? I do not see how can the world be in me when the opposite I am in the world seems so obvious?
Yes,
What's
Maharaj.
that? Okay. All right. Well, it's a good question. He says, still, I do not see how can the world be in me when the opposite I am in the world is so obvious. Yes, well, just imagine you're in the dream and you're asking the same question, right? How can this dream be in me when I'm so obviously in the dream? How can that be real? Oh my goodness. Let me turn on the I can't believe, Rena, you didn't tell me this morning to mute everyone. Now I have to make it look like I'm doing it. All right. So feel free, of course, as always, to unmute for any reason that you deem sensible or not. So our question, how is they say that the reality is that this universe is in us, that we are not in the universe, or that the universal I is not in the universe. That God, that God is the container of all things. Of course, God is in and through all things as well. But like in the dream, you are the dream, but you don't have that sense at all. You see yourself in the dream, and then everything is other, just like in the waking dream. And so when Vivekananda said that, Alameda is not, I am not in Alameda, Alameda is in me. How can this be true? And Maharaj says, even to say I am the world is me, is a sign of ignorance. But when I keep in mind and confirm in life my identity with the world, a power arises in me which destroys the ignorance, burns it up completely. But when I keep in mind and confirm in life my identity with the world. All right, so yes, indeed. Okay, that's very interesting what he's saying here. So even when I say I'm in the world, or I am the world and the world is me, that's a sign of ignorance, right? And what's the biggest sign of ignorance? Well, that there's an I and a me in that statement, right? And so I's and me's are not words that are often used by enlightened souls, and especially when they're making a declaration of attribute. This is my attribute. I am the world, or the world is me, right? To say that, you have to posit a difference and then deny it simultaneously. And so there's ignorance in there. But he says, if I keep in mind, which means I don't make a statement of identity about it, but I keep myself aware of my presence, of my identity, and to keep in mind the knowledge that everything around me is made of the same dream stuff that I am, and that dream stuff we would call God or Brahman, and we begin to live accordingly to that, then he says that from that practice of being in constant memory, constant remembrance of the reality, a power arises in me which destroys the ignorance. I begin to understand. I begin to see the reality of it, and this ignorance gets ultimately burned up completely, right? Because of the fact that what we would be reinforcing is true, even though it's counter to our hypnotization, our idea that we are a body mind and that we exist within a context of this universe and this world. And so the questioner says, well, is the witness of ignorance separate from ignorance? Is not to say I am ignorant a part of ignorance? Maharaj, well, of course. All that I can truly say is I am, right? That is the only thing that we know that isn't relative, that doesn't depend on anything else that we know. It's the only thing. Every other piece of information in your mind is comparative, right? It only exists as a fact because it's compared to something that counters it or supports it. But the one thing in our mind that is not relative and is not linked to any other thought is the I am, right? So all I can say truly is I am. All else is inference, right? It's the result of comparing two other things or three things or however many things you're comparing, but it's always a relative. It's an inference. Because of this, I can infer that, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire. So I smell the smoke, I can infer the fire. But inference has become a habit, right? We assume it and we use it constantly. We use it in order to create our body, right? Because I realized one time laying in bed, I could feel the cold sheets on the tips of my toes. And so I was sitting there contemplating that feeling of the cold sheets on the tips of my toes. And by isolating that feeling, just really observing that feeling, I understood there's no geolocation with that feeling. I cannot tell where my toes are from the feeling of cold sheets on the tips of them, right? To find my toes, to know the location of my toes, I have to cross-reference the feeling of the cold sheets with the visual from my eyes that's looking down at the end of my bed and seeing 10 little toes pushing up in the sheets. And then I know where my toes are. Ah, that's there, right? And so I compose my body piece by piece by aligning all the information I'm getting in from my 5 different senses, and from that inference, I build a body. And then from that inference, I build my body's place in an external universe, right? And from all of that space in the universe, I determine what I am because I infer my identity from my experience as a body and a mind, right? But the only thing we know is that I am. The sense I am is the manifestation of a deeper cause, which you may call self or God or reality or by any other name. The I am is in the world, but it is the key which can open the door out of the world. The moon dancing on the water is seen in the water, but it is caused by the moon in the sky and not by the water. Right. So he's saying that this I am, when you say that within the dream, then you are in the dream, right? You establish your isness within the dream, because to say I am is ignorance. To have an existence, to manifest, right? We know from Ramakrishna's statements that in order for him to manifest the body and to maintain the body, he had to have a smidgen, just a smidge of ignorance in there, a desire for the company of devotees or a desire for a jalebi sweet or something like that. So there has to be some desire in order for a body to manifest and so for God to manifest in the world as an incarnation, he has to take on an identity. He has to take on a story of some kind. That's just apparently how it works, right? So the I am is in the world, and it's both in the world and it's also our way out, because that same I am that is present when you're in the dream is also present when you're outside of the dream, when you wake up, right? Even though everything else is different, the I am is the one thing that is the same between your waking state and your dream state. And you know that is the real you, because you don't have a sense of being a partial you when you're in the dream and you're wearing your butterfly body, and running from some thugs in New York City on the moon, right? But there's still this I am, this isness that you've now identified with this whole different scenario. But when you wake up, that little crystal of I am is going to be slipped out of that dream body that you've created and return to the sleeping body in the bed. And now your I am is going to be attached to a whole different universe than what it was in the dream. And so by knowing that I am, knowing that piece that is the same in waking state and in dreaming state, that becomes our elevator out of ignorance, right? To place our identity on that sliver, that crystal of I am, that is the same, whether I'm dreaming, whether I'm awake, whether I'm in deep sleep, that I am, knowing that to be ourself is the trick. Identifying with that and not with the body in the dream and not with the body when it's awake, but with the thing itself. And that would be the same as identifying with inner peace or identifying with silence, right? I am silence or I am peace. And by identifying with that, that's what begins to manifest. I am love, right? And so this is both a sign of ignorance to say I am when we put it in a context, but it's also the way out of that context, the way out of it as well.
May I ask a question here?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So if the identification with I am happens, does this mean that I don't want to use the word you or I or a person starts experiencing other people's pain and feelings in the same way as they experience their own connected to their particular body at this time?
Mm-hmm.
It does.
It can, yes, it can. In Raja Yoga, Vivekananda talks about that. We all actually share a universal mind. You know, there's that the universe, when the universe is, yeah, well, it's a universal mind. The universe is actually exists as consciousness within a universal mind. And so we all share a portion of that mind that we limit, that is limited by our boundary of egoism. This is my portion of the universal mind, right? This is the bit that I'm using, and everything else is not me. But Vivekananda says in Raja Yoga that, you know, that there are these spiritual gifts that are available out there. He doesn't recommend that we pursue them or even pay attention to them. But he talks about one in particular, about the ability to read minds. And he said, reading minds, the only thing necessary is to absolutely still your own. Because if you still your own, then the ripples on the other side of the pond that are happening in another person's mind will ripple into your placid mind, and you can see their thoughts. You can experience themselves through yourself. And so,
Yeah,
yes.
right. That's easier to kind of comprehend, but like if like physical sensations, like you felt the sheets on your toes, and will you be able to feel the sheets on someone else's toes, so-called someone else's?
Yes, yes, because by the time they're experiencing it, it's no longer sheets on toes, it's biochemical information and thought. It becomes thought when they recognize it. And so a thought of any kind, whether it's the thought of the feelings in their body or whether it's the thought of what's going on in their mind, all of those things are thought alone. Everything that comes in through the senses becomes thought when it becomes experience, right? And so that thought is just another wave in mind. And so those waves can be picked up, can be read from anywhere, because the fact is that they're all happening in the same mind. We're just
And once you drop your I am something identity.
right. As soon as you break egoism, you pull down the boundary of self, or as much as possible. We do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.
Maharaj, I have a question.
Yes.
So when you talk about the I am stick from the dream state to the waking state and the beyond, but as one abides, there is no I am there. One uses the I am to abide, but in that abidance, there is no I am there anymore, right? There's because
Yes.
there's what is one accessing at that time?
That's the question. We don't really have an answer for that. I mean, it's the divine, in the divine, of the divine. But what the initial cause is, what is it that brings the first manifestation? We don't have an answer for that. We don't know. Or, you know, yugas, they sort of describe it as being a cyclical process that just sort of happens, that, you know, God expands into
Just
the
like
universe.
abidance in the non-manifested state.
Yeah, well, abidance in the non-manifest. Yeah, you could say that, but you could say anything, because there would be no subject to talk about. There would be nothing, no object to describe in that state. But yeah, it's the pure potential of everything in a point, right? So it takes no time and space, and it's not visualized, it doesn't manifest, and there's nothing outside of it.
Right.
Right. So it's one of those things the mind can't conceive of it. So we're not going to know that answer. We wouldn't be able to even comprehend.
So in that sense, I am is just a door.
Yes. Well, I am, yes. It's everything. I mean,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
I am is everything.
Yeah.
And so it's the I am is just the stem of the Christmas tree, and then we put on the branches. They say I'm a man, so we put on male branches, right. And, you know, I'm 60, and so then we kill a few leaves and break a few branches, and now it's 60, and then like that. Yeah, the I am is what we decorate to become our personality, and play our play. And to say it, yes, the highest state there is what? What would I say? You would drop the I, because there would be no particularity.
Right.
But isness would still.
Yeah, it's like they say, it's the shunya and the totalness, the totality at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. It's not something I don't think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not something we're going to be able to answer in a satisfying way.
Right.
It's a parable or a story or a poem.
Right.
Well, could it be that the I is gone and the B, only the B is?
Well, I was going to say that.
Oh.
But how are you going to know that the isness remains if there's no manifestation?
Yeah.
Right. So it's, again, don't draw conclusions from this, because basically all we're saying is a big shrug. It's not answerable. You know, it's not answerable. It's like within the dream, it's like that example. You fly, you learn how to fly. You don't learn how to fly, but in my dream, I remember when I was 12, in my dream, I jumped off my brother's dresser and I was able to fly. And I was sort of like swimming underwater, but in the air. Right. So in the dream, you beg the question, well, how can I fly? What are the physics of my flying? Right. And you can study it all out and work it all out in the dream. But when you wake up, that was a dream question that doesn't make any sense outside the context of the dream. You can't fly. Jump off your brother's dresser. The next day, literally, me and my friend Brigitte, we jumped off my brother's dresser all morning trying to fly. You know, because I knew exactly how it happened in the dream, but we just couldn't do it. Didn't stop us from trying. And so this question, what is the I am without the I or without the am? That's an outside of the dream question that we don't have the wherewithal to.
Yes, this is melting together with everything.
Yes, well, simultaneously, though, it's both everything and nothing simultaneously. Mm-hmm. You know, it both is and isn't. And it does exist. You know, that's the thing that makes it eternal. Well, yeah, just let me squirm my way out of it and just say there's not an answer to the why, to the first cause, as to what that is. God, we just call the first cause God. That isness, the I am. So the questioner says, still, the main point seems to escape me. I can admit that the world in which I live and move and have my being is of my own creation, a projection of myself, of my imagination, on the unknown world, the world as it is, the world of absolute matter, whatever this matter may be, the world of my own creation may be quite unlike the ultimate, the real world, just like the cinema screen is quite unlike the pictures projected onto it. Nevertheless, this absolute world exists quite independent of myself. Okay, so that's his question there. Maharaj, well, quite so. The world of absolute reality onto which your mind has projected a world of relative unreality is independent of yourself for the very simple reason that it is yourself, right? So it's independent of your ego self, but it is your real self, right? So it's both separate from you and not separate from you, right? So we run into the same paradox. Because that's why the scriptures tell you, if it changes, it's unreal. If it's unreal, don't go looking for explanations about it. It's unreal. Let it be unreal. Just know that it's somehow this conjured wonder of the play of the mother. So quite so, the world of absolute reality onto which your mind has projected a world of relative unreality is independent of yourself for the very simple reason that it is yourself, right? Is there no contradiction in terms? How can independence prove identity? Maharaj, examine the motion of change and you will see. What can change while you do not change can be said to be independent of you. But what is changeless must be one with whatever else is changeless. For duality implies interaction, and interaction means change. In other words, the absolutely material and absolutely spiritual, the totally objective and the totally subjective, are identical, both in substance and essence, right? So everything is both subject and object simultaneously. That's that first verse in the book of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? And so you've got that same perplexing duality in the Christian metaphysics also, that God you have both God in the absolute unchanging, and yet you've got the constant flow of unrepeated change simultaneously. But you can't say that Brahman is the cause of it, and you also can't say that Brahman is not the cause of it, because it is all Brahman. Right? It's just the seed of me and mine in pure mind that causes the universe. It's just that piece of dust in the oyster's mouth that creates the pearl. So it's that, we have this thought of particular, and we jump into the pure mind with the sense of particular, and that creates waves, that creates thought, right? And those thoughts then infer an entire universe to accommodate the wrong idea that you are a particular, a place and time. So questioner, so he says, our Maharaj here said, in other words, the absolute material and the absolute spiritual, the totally objective and the totally subjective are identical, both in substance and essence. I kind of see this, just to say another thing about it, when we talk about cause and effect, you can only have cause and effect as long as you have boundaries, and you look at a process between two boundaries. Right? Only when you put in boundaries do you have a cause and its effect. If you take that boundary back, you find that your cause, in this instance, becomes the effect of another cause. And so everything without boundary is both a cause and an effect. And so in the same way, when you take away all boundaries, everything that is objective and everything that is subjective no longer have that distinction. They are both within there.
So Maharaj, when he's talking about the subjective, he's talking about the ego self?
Yeah, yes, that which is the subject of observation, and the objective, which is that which is being, yeah, which is being observed. So the subject and object. I'm the subject, and the world is an object. You know, the questioner says, like in a tri-dimensional picture, the light forms its own screen. Okay. Glad he's asking Maharaj that question. I'd be like, what are you asking? Maharaj, well, any comparison will do. The main point to grasp is that you have projected onto yourself a world of your own imagination based on memories, on desires, and on fears, and that you have imprisoned yourself in it. Break the spell and be free. Right, this is fascinating. Look at this. So any comparison do. The main point to grasp is that you have projected onto yourself a world of your own imagination based on memories, based on desires, based on fears, and that you have imprisoned yourself in it. Break the spell and be free, right? So you've imprisoned yourself in it. How is that? You've identified with this point of reference, this body, this mind. And with this body and this mind is created within the projection that of your imagination, right? So it's just like in your dream. In your dream, you're sure that that gang is chasing you through the streets of New York and they're going to kill you, and you're terrified. So you're running all over the place. Where are you trying to hide? You're trying to hide in the dream. And that's not going to work because that's where you're being pursued, is in the dream. And so what is the solution? It's to know that you're not in the dream. And then you can relax. You know that you don't have to be afraid of the people that are chasing you, that you are not the person being chased, that you are both the chaser and the chasee in that scenario. Right? And so by knowing that, by accepting that, by knowing that at the deepest level, you break the spell. You break the spell of the dream. You know the dream is unreal and you come out. Right? And so this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to come to wake up, to realize that this prison is only make-believe. You know, there's a wonderful, I can't remember the name of that science fiction book, but there's a science fiction book in which there's a good guy terrorist. You know, he's kind of pushing against a very dystopian machine in the future, and they catch him, but they don't put him in a prison. They put him in an AR. They induce an AR directly in his brain, an alternative reality. And in that alternative reality, he's in a prison, right? And then they let him escape in that alternate reality. They let him have the illusion of escaping from that prison, and he's running, thinking he's gotten free. And then they just put something in there in the dream to indicate, nope, you're still in prison. And they put him back in the prison reality. And they do that 3 or 4 times. And the last frame of the movie is this guy sitting in an open room with no bars, no locks, no doors, sitting on the floor. In reality now, they've taken away the alternative reality, but he does not know how to know whether he's in the reality or not in the reality. And he no longer tries to escape because he's done it so many times and just ended up that it was all the alternative reality. It wasn't reality. And so in the end, when they put him in reality, he doesn't know it. And he can't get out. He doesn't try to escape anymore. So you see, this is our circumstance, right? We live in the unreal, and we've identified ourselves with the unreal. And we've we've done many things, to try and do something differently. We can't seem to do it. And so we just settle into our circular, cycle of habits, of thoughts and habits that we get stuck in. So the questioner says, well, how does one break the spell? How do we do this? Maharaj, assert your independence in thought and action, right? Assert your independence. After all, all hangs on your faith in yourself, on the conviction that what you see and hear, think and feel is real. Why not question your faith? No doubt, this world is painted by you on the screen of consciousness and is entirely your own private world. Only your sense I am, though in the world, is not of the world. By no effort of logic or imagination can you change the I am into I am not. In the very denial of your being, you assert it. Once you realize that the world is your own projection, you are free of it. You need not free yourself of a world that does not exist, except in your own imagination. However, is the picture beautiful or ugly you are painting it, and you are not bound by it. Realize that there is nobody to force it on you. Right? So this really is a level of choice that you have to have a very pure mind in order for it to have its effect. But one way to practice it is getting up in the morning. Getting up in the morning. This is the practice that I've been doing for a while now. Is deciding on your mood before the mind tells you its mood. Right? So you wake up, and instead of kind of querying the mind for what your mood is for the day, you get up and immediately say something positive, think of something good that you're going to do, and sit there and remind yourself that you live in the dream of the divine, and declare yourself excited about your day, and get up and go. And don't assert that reality. And at first it's a funny thing, because the ego will really try and shut you down. The ego will try and exert, no, you're not in that, you're not in that mood, you're in this mood. Right? Or you can't be in that mood because you don't have a reason to be happy or to be excited. Here's 5 reasons not to be excited and happy. Right? And so the mind will counter with all of that, and you just have to continue to assert your reality. Like, no, that is not. I decide what mood I'm in. You don't get to decide what mood I'm in. I get to decide my outlook for the day. You do not get to decide my outlook for the day. Right? And so you take control. And the amazing thing is that with just a little bit of practice like that, it works. It works. You actually get to decide that you're happy, that you're content, that you're fine. Right? You can withdraw that. And so that's what he's saying here. Assert your independence in thought and action. After all hangs on your faith in yourself. Right? It's all a matter of what you believe, of what you've attached to, what you've identified with, what you think is real. On the conviction of what you see and hear, think and feel, that it's real. That's the point. You've said this dream is real. And if you say this dream is real and that you're in it, that requires that you obey it and that you're subject to it. Right? But if you declare your independence, no, I'm in a good mood. I determine my day. I determine my karma. I determine, how this moment hits me. And then you've got a level of freedom at first, just a small bit of wiggle room. We keep wiggling it, and as you know, wiggle things long enough, they break free. They break loose. Right? No doubt this world is painted by you on a screen of consciousness and is entirely your own private world. Only your sense I am, though in the world, is not of the world. Now, this is interesting that he's positing here that there is no one else in my world right now but me, that not really is he. He's not positing that. He's positing that the only one in this dream is God, the dreamer. And that you and me, all of us looking at each other right now, are just characters in the dream of God. But our essence is the sleeper. Our essence is God. We cannot have an existence if God wakes up. Right? If God wakes up, we all blip out. Boop, gone. Just maybe a memory. I doubt it, but whatever. But see, that's the reality of this. And so we are not real. And that's what our realization will be. So we, as we see each other in the pictures here, will not realize God. Because the realization will be We didn't exist in this form. We didn't exist as separate. We were always the whole dream. We were always the whole world, right? By no effort of logic or imagination can you change the I am into I am not, right? Existence is our nature. That's why it's one of the fundamentals: existence, love, and wisdom, or intelligence. Those are the fundamentals of isness. So you cannot change the I am into I am not, because even doing that proves that you are, because you're making a declaration about yourself. In the very denial of your being, you assert it. Once you realize that the world is your own projection, you're free of it. That's realization, when you know that you're dreaming while you're dreaming. You need not free yourself of a world that does not exist, right? So there's nothing that needs to be done beyond that, because none of this was real. It's not like you have a chain of cause and effect that now you have to undo. You simply know the dream to be a dream, and its power is removed from it. However, the picture is how beautiful or ugly, you are painting it, and you are not bound by it. Realize that there is nobody to force it on you, right? And this is one of those nice things, that one of those corollaries that even as a bhakta, you have to be careful as a bhakta when you play with these ideas a little bit, because we've got God whom we're in love with and who is helping us with all of this. But quite often we start to push the blame for our condition on God. Why did you do this to me? Why did you place me here? Why is this happening? And when we push those things on God, we become subject to them, right? And so we can use a little bit of the Jnani knowledge that I am that ultimately it's your highest self that you call God, right? And that it is separate from you, as long as you've literally locked yourself in your lower self and refused to come out. So in that sense, God is real. It's not the God part that's unreal, it's the you part that's unreal, right? And so as we know that, we let go, and then the ignorance evaporates. We come to know this reality. Realize that there is no one outside yourself to force it. I like to tell people that when you die, whether or not you take a new body it's going to be entirely up to you. And what kind of body is, that's going to be entirely up to you. There is no third party out there that's going to force something on you. Nope, you're still ignorant. You're going back as a pig. You have no choice. No, it'll be you that looks over at a pig's body and say, ooh, cool, and jump in. And now you've got your new life going, right? And then you kick God around the block. Why'd you put me in a pig's body, right? And now that you've identified with a pig, God is outside of yourself, and God just looks at you and like, I didn't do that. You jumped in. You're the one that wanted that. Have fun. All right. Realize that there is nobody to force it on you, that it is due to the habit of taking the imaginary to be real. See the imaginary as imaginary and be free of fear. Just as the colors in this carpet are brought out by light, but light is not the color, so is the world caused by you, and you are not the world. That which creates and sustains the world, you may call it God or providence, but ultimately, you are the proof that God exists, not the other way around. For before any question about God can be put, you must be there to put it. All right, well, that's pretty fascinating there, that part there. What does he says? That which creates and sustains the world, you can call it God or providence, but you're ultimately the proof that it exists, because you're the one who verifies it. You are the experiencer of it. You are the one that gives it meaning. It's not the other way around. So before any question about God can be put forward, you must be there to put it forward. So it's an interesting way of perceiving it there, that you are the ultimate cause. You are the reality. God is an experience in time, our questioner says, but the experiencer is timeless. Boy, he twists some things around sometimes. It's really interesting looking at his questions. It really shows you what our mind does, how contorted our mind can get in ignorance. God is an experience in time, but the experiencer is timeless. He's got it. It's interesting that he phrases it like that, that he would think himself to be timeless when that's not his experience. See, so he's got a real twist going on. So Maharaj says, even the experiencer is secondary. Primary is the infinite expanse of consciousness, the eternal possibility, the immeasurable potential of all that was, is, and will be. Okay, so that's what we're talking about, the unmanifest. There is a sage's description of the unmanifest, like we were trying to do earlier, right? So that ultimate reality is the eternal possibility. That I
think
love.
in the Brahma Sutras, Adi Sankaracharya gives some commentary on distinguishing Brahman in a formless sense and an embodied sense. I think he uses the term Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman.
Uh-huh.
I think he makes the point that like when we speak about God like with properties like omnipotence, omnipresence, and so on, we're speaking specifically of Saguna Brahman or Ishvara,
Yes.
because these are specific properties that distinguish God from limited beings. But then he also further like distinguishes that from Nirguna Brahman, which is Sachinanda. It's not it lacks properties, including those associated with God.
Uh-huh.
Again,
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's what he's trying to get at. But
Definitely. No, that's definitely part of what he's talking about. The questioner, of course, has got it kind of just twisted around, just because he's not really clear in what he's saying, I don't think, because he's told us about what he thinks of himself, and it's not that he's timeless, but yet here he's putting himself in that position. So it's interesting. But Maharaj is not getting nitpicky like that. He just says to him, he says, well, even the experiencer is secondary, right? If there's an experiencer, then you're implying an experience. And if you've got two, you're not at the highest state. If you've got a duality going on there, right? He says the primary, the one without a second, Nirguna Brahman, is he's giving it attributes that really are meaningless, that it's an infinite expanse of consciousness, right? So, or awareness. We would probably say at this level of being an expanse of awareness. It's got the potential of objects in it. So I don't know if that's enough to call it consciousness, but he's calling it consciousness. So we'll say the potential of objects is good enough for awareness to become consciousness. So primary is an infinite expanse of consciousness, just undefined. It can be anything. The eternal possibility, the immeasurable potential of all that was, is, and will be. Right? So it's just that pregnant emptiness, which is full of potential, but appears empty, appears non-existent, but it is the source and possibility of all existence. When you look at anything, it is the ultimate that you see, but you imagine that you see a cloud or a tree, right? So everything that we're experiencing is that ultimate reality, but we've imagined it. That ultimate reality has become all of this. And again, let's just go back into that dream, right? That mind, before the dream takes place in it, is Brahman. It's Nirguna Brahman, that no attributes. There's no dream. It's just the potential of all dreams sitting there. And then you go to sleep, and then you enter in to that dream. And now that Nirguna has become Saguna. Now it's not an empty mind anymore. It's a universe. It's the universe of your dream. And the substance that was the full potential before the dream began, the mind stuff, the dream material, is still the same dream material that it was before the dream started and after the dream started. It's the same one, right? And it actually is not any different than it was, but you, the experiencer of the dream, are now going to use it to project a dream. And so it projects a dream, but it itself is not the dream. It itself is all dreams. It's the potential of every dream. But in this moment, you have projected a particular by taking a particular sense of self into it. All right. Learn to look without imagination, to listen without distortion. That is all. Stop attributing names and shapes to the essentially nameless and formless. Realize that every mode of perception is subjective, that what is seen or heard, touched or smelt, felt or thought, expected or imagined is in the mind and not in reality, and you will experience peace. You will experience freedom from fear. Right? So know this to be real. That's why Ramakrishna says this constant discernment. So it's not that you're trying to make something that's not real. It's a constant discernment of observing things without opinions or projections about them, just simply seeing. And this is how you become aware, right? The first time that my favorite thing that I talk to you guys always about, I can't wait to get to it every single time I mention it, is that notion that there is evidence that this world is not real just by thinking about it. It's like I thought about sight. I said, I see the light go into my eye, but I know that the eye socket is solid there. That light never gets to my brain. So what am I actually seeing? What is my brain actually processing? It's not processing light. It's not processing a vision of stuff, right? What it's processing is the neural information that the light gets translated into at the back of the eye. That sends that information to my brain, and my brain, that portion of my brain responsible for sight data, then creates symbols for the information that it's getting from the eye. And that symbol for the information that it's getting from the eye is actually the world I live in. I don't live in the thing itself. I do not know what the source of the visual information is, because the eye is just as much a symbol for the source of sight as the information that it's giving to the mind. There is no way to know what we are experiencing. There is no way to know the source of our sense information. And we know that now in modern times even more so, because we can spoof it. Right? You can put a headset on your grandmother and make her walk across an I-beam on the top of a skyscraper, right? And we've seen evidence from a million videos on YouTube that grandma's going to be terrified to walk on the carpet, right? So we can see clearly, if you start paying attention at that level all the time, this world will fall apart. It will not remain convincing that it is a material place that's separate and apart from you. Because all of this knowledge that's being shared right now came from Sri Nisargadatta simply paying attention and looking very closely at what's going on, what's happening.
Could you, can I ask a question, Claire?
Uh-huh.
Can you bring in collective co-experiencing of the same dream, like we collective co-experiences, right? Like we could look at a tree and say, okay, that's a tree, that's a chair. So how does that work? What's the mechanism of it? Obviously, it will be different for different, like for ants, for dogs, they would look at an object and have a different perception of it. So where's the mechanism of collective similar co-experience? Or how does it work? Does that make sense?
Yes. And there's not a clear answer doesn't come to it, except that we live in God's mind, right? So that's not only our dream. We have a sense of egoism that separates us from the whole, that gives us that illusion of private or separate. But the dream is universal. The mind is there. I don't know what I think about this. I'm going to be honest with you, because there's two ways to look at it. One is that we are all dream characters in God's dream. And so there are no boundaries in there that belong to us, right? In one sense, in that way, we make God the sleeper and God the dreamer, and all of us are imaginary, and we're all in the dream. And it's all shared because God is creating the dream and putting us all in it. And so that's how we have a common, we can all see the tree in the front yard, right? Even though the dream is unique. And so in one sense, yes, we've got a shared dream that we're all validating. In another sense, no, because we are all having a subjective experience that of the same dream that is very unique. You know, that's what makes all of our lives quite different. And we've seen many times how you can have a group of 10 people that can observe the same experience, the same happening, and every one of them will have a different experience of it. You know, we see that in the Gospels of Jesus at the beginning of the Bible. You know, it's like 4 guys, all of them spent their lives with Jesus. Each of them wrote their Gospels, and they're all different. They all remembered different things. Even some of the same things being described are described differently, right? And so
I'm sure every moment is
yes,
experienced differently by every individual,
exactly.
yet it's similar as well. So there is sameness and difference
Yes,
in every single moment of experience.
exactly. And I think that's the answer to the question, that yes, there is a common experience. There is something that we are experiencing, but we are all having our very own experience of that something. And so even though the source is one without a second, the source is God, it's the same for all of us. That which we choose to identify with, that which we choose to interpret, that which we choose to think of as real is independent to each one of us. And so we'll all have a very different experience of the same dream.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. So learn to look without imagination, right? So see things as they are and not as the mind tells you. That's why we try and silence mind. That's why we try and control when we think, because it's in that silence, that we know who we are. And that knowledge can't be put into words because of that triad business. So learn to look without imagination, to listen without distortion, right? What does that mean? In a simple way, a very high level, very low level metaphor would be when you're talking to somebody or when they're talking to you, listen. Don't sit there and start composing your response. Don't sit there and start working on what you're going to say back to them while you're listening to them. Listen to them. Let your response come when they stop. You sit there and really engage. Listen. Don't have something else going on inside. And it's the same thing with this world, right? I remember, writing a poem to my friend Jamie, who had just died of AIDS back in, I don't know, 94 or 5. And after I found out that he had passed the night before, I wandered up on this hill in San Francisco and I sat on top of this hill and I was just writing to Jamie, this, who had just died. I was writing this poem to him and I was writing about what I was seeing. And I was writing, Jamie, you've passed away last night. You're not in this world anymore. And the city has already forgotten you. I look down on Market Street and all the traffic is going just like it always goes, and everybody running to get where they're going as they always have. The world has already left you behind, and then I saw these 2 women climbing on the rocks over there. And I said, and down below, there's this lesbian couple climbing over the rocks. And I was just describing it. And then I realized, I don't know a single thing about those 2 women. Why am I saying it's 2 women doing anything? I have no idea about them, and so it's like that. Catch yourself writing your story. That's what Sri Nisargadatta is telling you. Become observant enough of your mind to see that the majority of the stuff you deal with in a day is your imagination. Like, I think about this, we read all this stuff going on in the world, and we get all concerned about Israel and Palestine and South Africa, this, that, and the others, right? What do I personally actually know about the world? I know absolutely nothing, right? I'm completely at the mercy of these talking heads to tell me about what's going on in the world. And yet I will make my day about that. I'll ruin a day about that, right? By living in a world that I don't know anything about and that I'm hearing something about and believing it and taking it on as real and just leaving it at that, right? But my experience of my day, it's quite nice, I have to say. Everything here, everything's going well in my world, the world that I'm actually living in. And so I can sit here and get all worked up and tied in a knot about things that I can't do anything about, that I don't even know the reality of. I just know a small subset of people. As an American, I find this going on in myself all the time. I imagine that my experience of this day and age is the same of everybody else's in the world. But if all you have to do is a little bit of traveling, and you realize that American problems aren't universal. That Americans' day, the day in America, is not the universal experience. That there are countries out there that don't care about our existence at all, or carrying on their day, not even thinking of us. Right? And so this is what discernment does for us. And this is how we break free of being controlled by an imaginary world that we live in. Things can always be seen in a multiplicity of ways. And for us as spiritual seekers, we place the assumption that the ultimate nature of it all is love and wisdom. And by finding that perspective, we grow in love and wisdom, right? We come to a working knowledge of what we are. And it then ceases to be a working knowledge and becomes an expressive knowledge, an expressive of isness, expressive of love, expressive of our wisdom through our being, right? Not being something, but being, just simply present. So he tells us, he says, stop attributing names and shapes to the essentially nameless and formless. Realize that every mode of perception is subjective, and what is seen or heard, touched or smelt, felt or thought, expected or imagined, is in the mind and not in reality, and you will experience peace and freedom from fear. Even the sense of I am is composed of the pure light and the sense of being. The I is there even without the am. So is the pure light there, whether you say I or not. Become aware of that pure light, and you will never lose it. The beingness in being, the awareness in consciousness, the interest in every experience, that is not describable, yet perfectly accessible, for there is nothing else, right? So we're going to stop there for today. And I'm going to open it up here for you guys to have conversation.